I am an extremely passionate and committed human services professional who possesses an in-depth working knowledge of the psychological and sociological aspects of human development. I consider myself to be a cognitive behavioral specialist, believing that making a change in how one thinks brings about a change in what one does. Many shy away from therapy because they feel their situations are either unique or they are fearful, embarrassed, or ashamed to let others know they need help. SciSpot is my way of corralling pertinent personal, professional, and academic information on understanding human development in one place for all to access privately and even share with others. My personal mission statement is, I am driven by divine precepts and an undying passion to facilitate change in the lives of others. What's yours? Let SciSpot guide you through your healing and provide you with many other ways of becoming better today than you were yesterday. Come on in and join me.
And good morning. Welcome to SciSpot Live. I'm your host as always, Sabir Alim. So listen, I'm glad you joined in. Last week was a great show. Did a lot for me, and most of these shows, as I stated in my last show, helped me. And people don't really realize how much it helps me. It's helpful to be able to talk about things. When you have things that are laying within your spirit, right? It's helpful to talk about those things. And a lot of times, we don't have the venue to use to talk about what it is that is near and dear to us. And even though we have, friends, we have wives, husbands, and lovers, whatever it is that you choose to call that person, we have those people, but there are some things that are right all the way down in there, all the way down in there. Those things that we never want anybody to know about. Like, we don't want people to know what we do in the dark, in the sense that there are many who cry in the dark. Many of us who are laying in the bed in the fetal position, when we're by ourselves, because we have this inner turmoil that we can't seem to free ourselves from, because we don't feel like we could just be ourselves. And this is pretty much where last week's show had concluded. We were talking about the 4 ways that the pain of childhood trauma impacts us as adults. And one of the things that came up at the end, in the part about the false self, because the false self was the first thing on that list, because we're talking about 4 ways. So the first thing on that list was about the false self, and how, when we bury our emotions, and I'm reading from the article again, we lose touch with who we really are, because our feelings are an integral part of us. We live our lives terrified that if we let the mask drop, we'll no longer be cared for, loved, or accepted. And that was a real heavy piece for me, and it is still a heavy piece for me, because I have found that throughout most of my life, I was getting ready to say all, but most of my life, I have always felt like me being me is not acceptable to anyone. Me giving people what it is that they want, appeasing them, accommodating them, yielding to them, has been something that I've always done. And it comes from childhood. It comes from childhood. It's a very destructive behavior. It's a self-destructive behavior, because at the end of the day, when I'm in that, my spirit is in that space with the person, where I'm feeling like I can't be myself, right? I become angry and resentful, but I still hang in there, because I want their love, because I want them to be there for me, because I want to be there for them. I want to be you know, that good kid, right? Because, you know, we also talked about in this part here about how children try to be the kind of child that they think their parents want. So if you beat me because I ask too many questions, I stop asking questions. So those things that are within me that I want to talk about, I don't talk about. Because you've already chastised me and conditioned me to believe that asking too many questions is a problem. It's a problem. So I look at my life today and I find myself, you know, looking at the relationships that I'm in, that I've been in, and I look at how I don't ask a whole lot of questions, and because when I do, I'm getting that same reaction that I got from my mother as a child. And again, this is not about me bashing my mother, my father, nor is it about you bashing yours. It's a matter of us improving in terms of how we interact with our children. What it is we say to them, how it is that we confront the challenges that they face coming up. Because it's not only the challenges that they face coming up as children, it's challenges we face as caretakers in addressing those things. Because if our stuff has not been addressed, because if we have not learned to manage and even to identify when we're in those particular positions of self and how we're imposing that upon others, we won't see the harm that we're doing. And I talked about in the last show about the misinformation that we tend to use to bring resolve to conditions that were used upon us. And it's wrong. Wrong is wrong. Just because you're the parent doesn't mean that you can't improve in terms of methodology of how you groom a child into themselves. Too many of us are creating mini me's and don't even realize it. We're creating mini me's and we don't even realize it. You know, we're causing people to be conditioned and cloned, and then later when we're confronted with ourselves through them, we begin to go through a whole lot of changes. And at the end of the day, we caused it and don't want to take ownership for it. We want to sit there and we want to blame. We want to blame the child. We want to call the child all kind of names. We're going to label the child with, all kind of negative, labels in terms of who they are. And those labels become who they are. And as a result of that, the child is not themselves based on what you tell them and based on what they begin to tell themselves. Their identity gets lost. The confusion is, who am I? Who should I be? And if I spend my life as a child trying to be someone who I'm not, when I enter into relationships with others, I have no clue who I am. So when people identify things about me who I'm in a relationship with, I deny it automatically. So now I'm defensive, now I'm confrontational and argumentative because you're saying something about me that I don't see, I don't believe it, but then I really don't know, so I begin to question myself, and then again I find myself yielding and accommodating that which you are saying about me because now I believe it. So because I want you to stay with me, because I want you to love me, because I want you to care for me, right? Even if your caring for me is not caring for me in the capacity of what I need, right? It's caring. And even if I have to continue to fight for you to care for me, I continue to do it. Going back to trying to be that good kid for mom, for daddy, whoever the caretaker may be, for you, right? That doesn't go away. So as long as I continue to find myself in this condition and I do nothing about it, I will find myself for the rest of my life, rubber banding back and forth to that point of childhood where I was trying to be a good kid up until today in an adult relationship where I'm still trying to be a good husband. a good lover, a good friend, regardless of what it is that I lose. Regardless of what it is that I lose. And at some point you get to see the reality of where you are, and that terrifying experience that it talks about in here of dropping the mask is multiplied by about 10, because now that I'm trying to be myself, now I'm viewed as being somebody totally different, which in many ways I am. But as we go down this list, we'll talk more about that, because there's a conditioning that begins to happen because the behavior is reinforced, the condition is reinforced, and every time you enter into another relationship, it just reinforces it more and more and more. There's no extinguisher in these kinds of relationships. If these relationships are those that have difficulty in making adjustments within themselves, so they know how to compromise. When you're in a relationship with people who don't know how to compromise, or who believe compromise is, from their own perspective, and not even compromising to listen to how another person sees it, so you can come together and you can become one, right? You're going to always be like this. You're never going to get to this point. You're going to try it different ways, and it's just not going to work out. And you find yourself in these situations for years. For years. So going back to the article, the best way to uncover the authentic you underneath the false self is by talking to a therapist who specializes in childhood emotional trauma and can help you reconnect with your feelings and express your emotions in a way that makes you feel both safe and whole. So one of the challenges that often happens, and particularly in the black community, because I can only speak specifically to the black community, is that there's no use of therapists, right? Well, not no, there's little use. There's not enough use of therapy, of counseling, especially when it comes to personal challenges, right? So, in order for the condition of the person, and this this really kind of spreads out and really speaks to the condition of the community, because when you have folks who use substances as a means to resolve internal strife, as opposed to connecting with someone else who can provide some level of guidance and direction toward their unresolved, right, to bring resolve, you're not going to have anything but a more compounded problem. For instance, if a person decides that they're so stressed about the relationship they're in, and instead of leaving the relationship, they remain in a relationship and begin to misuse and or abuse alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, pain medication, because we know that's a big thing, anything, food, right? Begin to use any of those things as a means to, and you're not even resolving, as a means to bring resolve within oneself regarding the issue. So for instance, you can eat and eat and eat and eat and go on emotional binge eating and find yourself obese, diabetic. Now you're even more dissatisfied with self because you've gained all this weight. So now you're stuck in the relationship that you are having challenges with, and you wind up staying, and it doesn't get any better, and it gets worse because of the way you feel about yourself. So because of the way you feel about yourself dictates how you interact with other people. So now your self-esteem is dropped, your self-perception has changed. Now the relationship worsens. Now this is a recipe for domestic violence, because at some point you lash out because you haven't dealt appropriately with the issue at hand. So you're avoiding the issue, you create another issue, which again only makes the other. I tell you, it's like Wild Kingdom out here. This is this blue heron, man. Sounds like a dinosaur. He actually looks like a dinosaur when it's flying. Beautiful bird. But what happens is, then something else comes as a result of that. So you begin to binge eat, binge emotional eating. You become obese. You become insulin dependent. That becomes depression. So now you're depressed. So now depression begins to take over your life. Then that probably brings about the use of another substance in order to help with the depression. So you see how this goes? It goes from bad to worse. It doesn't get any better. And this is all as a result of an environment that you were conditioned in to think that you need to be a good person to accommodate and appease others. And at the end of the day, folks, check this out. Somebody's going to always find something to dislike about you. Always. Always. But it's easy to say that. But when this is something that you have been conditioned to believe about yourself and it resides within the confines of your mind, it doesn't go anywhere and it comes up front when it feels like it. When you feel, it comes up front. And it begins to stand right in your face and you begin to react to it. It's inevitable that that's going to happen. It's inevitable. So, number 2 on this list, right, is victimhood thinking. And again, I'm reading from an article on Psychology Today, 4 ways the pain of childhood impacts adult relationships. And number 2 on this list is, as I stated, victimhood thinking. What we think and believe, twofold, about ourselves drives our self-talk. Now, it's important to understand this. What we think, right, is what resides within the confines of our mind. What we think about ourselves. We think about those events that happen. We think about all the things that we've been told. We think about the events that took place and how you reacted to those things. And remember, the terrifying feeling of dropping the mask is something that, like, you rather keep it up than let it down, right? And what we believe about ourselves. So what we believe is that if I drop that mask, nobody will love me. Nobody will like me. I'll be by myself. Even though you find yourself in that same circumstance. So do you find yourself by yourself, not being yourself? Or is it preferable that you find yourself not being yourself, but with somebody else who continues to define you? It's a choice that you have to begin to make. And sometimes what's most preferable, is what has some level of satisfaction to the id. So if it's great sex, I'll hang in there. If it's financial benefits, okay, I'll hang in there. Whatever it is, right? You begin to just hang in there because that's the only aspect of you that's being pleased, which is the id. And the id is always seeking to satisfy itself. It's always seeking to satisfy itself. So at the end of the day, it's easy to stay in something that has something in it that feels good. It just is. Right? So, because again, this goes back to, it drives our self-talk. What I see about myself, what I think about myself, what I believe about myself dictates and defines what I tell myself on a daily basis. What I tell myself on a daily basis. Right? The way we talk to ourselves can empower or disempower us. Right? It's not what the other person is saying. The other person is saying something, but it's triggering something within us that we've not brought resolve to. But we'll blame the other person. Right? We'll blame the other person. And when we tell the other person about what we feel, and they reject our feelings, or they invalidate our feelings, right? We go right back into being who we've always been, based on who we've been created, who we've created ourselves, not been created. We created this person ourselves. We go back to being that person based on what we were told, what we began to believe early on as children. Children are very impressionable. We have to understand that. We have to understand that. So the negative self-talk, disempowers us and makes us feel like we have no control over our lives. When you look at the rate of suicide amongst teens, right? This is a very important area, because when you look at when you have the children who've committed suicide, and they talk about the lives, and they talk about things that preceded their deaths, when you look at those teens who have committed these violent crimes, when you look at their histories and what it is that they've been told about themselves and the environments they're raised up in, this is all about their conditioning. Children just don't wake up and become that. Nobody just becomes that. This is a conditioning, right? So when you look at being disempowered by my negative self-talk, right, it creates a mindset of nothing matters. Nothing matters, right? I don't matter to anybody. It's not even important. That I'm even here. So why are you making me go? Don't nobody talk to me. People don't even see me. So why am I going? Why are you inviting me to the party? For what? You need somebody to laugh at? You need somebody to poke holes at? What are you inviting me for? You want to be in a relationship with me for what? You just want sex. You don't want anything. Look at me. And you can't even see you in a mirror, seeing how attractive you are, or seeing the good things about yourself, because you can't see that. Every time you look in the mirror, the only thing you see is this image that has been created by you in your mind because of what has been said to you, because of how you've internalized those things, and those things continue to be compounded by others, when others say the same things or say something similar, or you just perceive it as being the same thing. And then you blame them and you lash out at them for your own self-perception. Yes, there has been an influence from the parent. Absolutely. Absolutely. But at some point you have to look at your own contribution. Right? And this is not blaming you, but it's asking you to look at what it is you're telling yourself as a result of this. You have to provide yourself with your own evidence as to what it is that you're telling yourself. Where's the evidence then? Well, my mother said so and so. Okay, so you were trying to be a good kid. What kid doesn't? This is the person who has the full responsibility of taking care of you. If they're not taking care of you, then that is an issue. That is something that's on them. But if they're caring for you and they're not caring for you in a capacity that you think they should care for you, then we're talking about something totally different. Because now we're talking about you understanding, right, where the id is always seeking to get what it wants, right? So you have to begin to understand that that parent is doing the best they can with what they got. It doesn't make them right. I didn't get this part till I was at like 35. I didn't get this part because I was so resentful about so many things that took place in my household. But because I've had the experience, and because I have an understanding of childhood development and all those things now I see it through a different lens. So I'm trying to give you that same view so you can understand what it is that you're going through and what it is that you can do to change. Because this victimhood thinking is very self-defeating, and again, it's very self-destructive, right? We may have been victimized as children, going back to the article, but we don't have to remain victims as adults, right? Now we're going into choice. Now we're going into choice. Because you can keep on saying over and over again, because I did it. You can keep on saying over and over again, this happened to me. I'm angry about. I'm resentful about. You're an adult and you're still talking the same language. You're still using the same language as you did then, as a child. And as you continue to get older, you still continue to use the same language as a child. And then once you enter into adulthood with the same language, it's reinforced, it's embedded. It's embedded, which makes it even more difficult to challenge within yourself. Because now you have to go back and you have to dispute all these things. Now you have to go back and you have to provide yourself the evidence. Now you have, wait a minute, hold on. Now you got to look at the fact that you're a parent. Right? In many cases, you're a parent now. So, whoa, hold on, stop the presses. Because now you have to begin to look through another lens. Because the way you were parented is the way you would typically parent your children. You parent in two ways. You do for your children those things that you found to be beneficial as a child yourself. You avoid doing those things that you did not find beneficial or pleasing, caring, loving, whatever, to you at the time you were a child. You avoid doing those things with yours, right? Because you dislike a thing that happened and you don't do it, it may have actually been a benefit, but you won't see it from that perspective, right? You'll see it as, no, that didn't work, so I'm not doing it. It didn't work for me. Well, it didn't work for you because you're an individual. So there's a reason why it didn't work for you, right? So you begin to, get evidence. And I always tell people the only way you can actually learn about, another person, to learn about yourself is to gather evidence. Get evidence. Where's the evidence to support your thinking about a particular thing? The problem that happens in adult relationships, with a person who has had this kind of trauma as a child, is that the argument begins to be back and forth with the other person. You want the other person to prove that your behavior was inappropriate. You want the other person to prove, that it in fact was wrong for what you said or did. That your actions are not in alignment with the direction that this relationship needs to go in. You want the other person to prove it. It's like an innocent until proven guilty kind of mindset, but that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And if you don't know this yourself, if you don't see this yourself, if you're not aware of this yourself, right? You go back and forth with the other person, still remaining a victim, making the person feel like they're victimizing you, but you're actually victimizing them because you were victimized in your mind, right? Because you were victimized in your mind, and sometimes it's factually that you were victimized, but either way you look at it, because you were victimized, you are now victimizing somebody else because of your condition, and you don't even see that. You don't even see that. So there's a choice here, right? When you're in an adult relationship and you love a person, right? And you're talking about spending the rest of your life with a person, right? You're talking about spending an insurmountable amount of time with this person. You're talking about intimate relations with this person, right? How do you just continue to go on and on and on with that same mindset, with that same condition, even when you see that it's destroying the relationship and you keep having it pointed out to you? So instead of you addressing it, you internalize it as you're being chastised, you're being abused. They're just like criticizing you. No, that I'm the kind of person, I address anything that is affecting our relationship. Anything that is affecting how you're talking to me or how you're treating me. I'll address any of those things. Everything else, that's you. Be you. But when it comes to our interaction, if we're not repairing or attempting to repair those things that are destroying this relationship, then we're not going anywhere. And I've experienced many of those relationships. it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then it starts going around and around and around in a circle. You know, uninterrupted, it just goes around and around. There's never any resolve. There's a laundry list of things that keep coming up because you're angry and resentful because it's being pointed out to you, right? I'm angry and resentful because I don't feel like I'm being listened to. I'm angry and resentful because I think I'm being accommodating, that I'm yielding to everything about you, but nothing about me is being, being accommodated or being yielded. It just keeps going on and on. It's a very vicious cycle. It's a very vicious cycle, right? Back to the article, even in circumstances where we think we don't have a choice, we always have a choice. Even if it's just the power to choose how we think about our life. You gotta really ask yourself, are people really, really, really that powerful over you that you remain in this relationship? Is it the power that they have over you, or is it that you're not using the power of choice? We all have a choice. We all have a choice. And I find myself, my stints in long-term relationships have gotten shorter and shorter because I have found myself tolerating these circumstances, feeling like I'm the victim in these circumstances for a long period of time. And I found myself like becoming less and less tolerable of it. So I've gotten to the point now in my life where, hold up, you can stay in this thing forever. You're still not going to come away with a loving and caring relationship that you thought that this was going to be, that it was intended to be. It's still going to be the same kind of relationship. If you want a loving and caring relationship, you have to go after a loving and caring relationship. If this one is not working, it's not loving and caring, you already have the evidence that it's not working. You need to move on. Moving on has been the greatest barrier for me because I stay stuck. Because I don't want you to not like me. I want you to love me. I don't want to hurt you, so I stay. Right? I'm telling you, listen, this is real rap here, folks. This is real rap here. And it's not just mine. It's millions of others who are dealing with this every day, who don't say anything about it. And I will always go back to the very first paper I did when I entered into collegiate studies. My very first paper was on why some women remain in abusive relationships. My very first paper. Right? So I saw things about myself, about my conditioning, and how, how I was in an environment where, there was abuse going on, and how being in that environment caused me to be, abusive, in some capacities because, it was conditioning me to argue. I hate arguing because when I argue, it makes me feel so uncomfortable. It makes me feel so out of control. And I'm so drained by it, and it takes me off task for my life's goals and aspirations. It just consumes me. It just consumes me, and it consumes me in that capacity because I have such disdain for it because of my conditioning as a child. Being in that kind of environment. And then finding myself in so many relationships that were identical. But, we always hear people say, we are what we eat. Well, I continue to gravitate towards the same thing. The same thing. Because I have not resolved that aspect of self which feels compelled to remain or to be in situations that are not healthy for me. Because I want to be the white knight. Right? I want to, bring forth to you, the goodness of things. Because I don't, because I like to do things, because I'm involved in things, because I try to keep myself busy, because I'm active in things. Right? So I feel like that's something that I have to offer. I feel like I'm a good man. I don't ask for anything, you know. But it's like when I do say something, it's like I get like blasted because like I'm asking for something. Like, what do you mean you want me to do such and such? You want me to? I don't love you. No, I don't do this. I've been you know. So it's a whole thing that begins to happen. But it all goes back to choice, right? I have a choice. Use your choice. Stop staying in situations that just you don't see a future in them. You don't see any growth in them. Stop going around in that vicious cycle, right? Stop. Get off. Get off that wheel of insanity. Just move on. Because at the end of the day, guess what? You're not going to feel any more love. You may feel less love, you know, and you begin to feel less love, and you begin to become more argumentative and more confrontational. Look, hey, I don't want to get too far into the next one because it speaks to this, what I'm beginning to go into in the next part. But it changes you as a person. It changes you as a person simply because you just didn't get out. Just because you didn't get out. Just get out. Really, get out. Get out now. If it's been a year, 6 months, and it hasn't changed, and it's been 3 months and it hasn't changed, if you find yourself in a circumstance where the same behavior keeps showing up over and over again, right? That's who the person is. Guaranteed. That's who the person is. That person is not going to change because they don't want to change. They don't want to change. Right? And it's easy for people to say, well, I don't know how to change. But if you can't identify that this behavior of yours is problematic, right? Because you've heard it before. It's not new. It didn't just come from me. You've heard it from countless others. So when you're in a situation like that and you find that these behaviors are repeating, get out. Because all you're going to do is continue to argue about those things. Well, unless you go to therapy. See, counseling helps you reveal your own evidence, right? That's what counseling does. That's what therapy does. So if you're not going to counseling, if a person is not willing to go to counseling to address these things, it's going to continue. Because you can't unconvince yourself. You can't unconvince yourself by yourself without some guidance and some direction. You really can't. Because what ultimately happens is people think that they have changed. They've gotten better with a circumstance. But they didn't bring any resolve to it. All you did was escape it. You walked away from it. Right? In your mind. You walked away from it. So you just don't do anything about that particular matter. You just disregard it. It doesn't go anywhere though. It stays there. And it just keeps showing up intermittently. But what you've done is you've stuffed it. And you've gotten that condition from somewhere else. You know how to stuff things, so now you'll stuff it. Why are you stuffing it? Because you want to satisfy the id, right? That part of self, which is always self-seeking satisfaction. That's all it does. It seeks to be satisfied by itself. That's all it's going to do. That's the part of the self that will never, ever change. Never. Never. So it's a matter of choice. You know, we have little to no control over our environments. Back to the article. And our lives when we're children. As a child, you didn't have any choice. But we're not children anymore. We're not children anymore. And I'm saying we're not children anymore. Right? Even for those of us who missed our childhood and had to go right from, you know, being a child, being a little boy, a little girl, and being pushed right into adult-like responsibilities. For males, we're always taught, as males, that's all we do. We go from boyhood to manhood. We don't get a chance to be boys. We're always conditioned to hear messages about what we need to do as men. You know, that's the messages that we get. Be tough, be this, be that. You go out there and you kill him. I don't care how big he is. Go out there and you hit him hard. You know, and that's how we're conditioned. We're conditioned that way. Right? You know, we're conditioned to get it done. We're not conditioned to be boys. We're not. And we need to have more parenting that teaches children to be children. How they dress, how they talk, right? What games they play, what places they go to, what they're permitted to do. A child should have discipline and structure in their lives. Right? Not rigidity in terms of not doing certain things. Because others are doing it don't make it right. And children tend to believe, well, because my friends are doing it, you don't let me do anything. Right? If you have them focused on, you know, hopes, dreams, and aspirations, they don't invest time into wanting to do everything that they see others doing, even if they're children. If a child is artistic, you nurture that. You get them the materials and the things that they need to be artistic, right? If a child is interested in science, you get them all the things they need, you know, to study science. You take them to those kind of places. You build on that strength because that's what they want. Then they're not interested in doing those other things. And we often refer to these kind of children as geeks, right? Oh, I don't, and then, because they're labeled as such to their friends. Listen, I was always the intellectual in my group, right? So, people, around me, they admired my smartness, my ability to do things, my penmanship, my ability to talk, with some so-called rational sense, right? So it was, we all have a different role. But we're not children anymore. It's likely we're more capable of changing our situation than we believe, right? Tomorrow's not guaranteed. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And we keep living life like, okay, I'll get to it next week, next month, next year. Meanwhile, life is passing you by. And then what happens is when you don't make that change and, something happens, God forbid, that it becomes even more devastating because now you begin to wish you would have done something. You wish you would have said something. You wish you would have, changed in. But, it's this jarring experience now that is happening, right, that has, forced you to see the reality of where, you really are in your life. So it concludes with, instead of thinking of ourselves as victims, we can think of ourselves as survivors. As survivors. And that's one of the things that I began to do early on when I started looking at my life and my relationship with my mother and my father. Right? I survived. I survived it. I got my behind whooped. I got yelled and screamed at. I got called all kinds of names. I went through all kinds of things coming up as a child. Not just in my household. I've had a lot of focus on household, but it's things that happen to us as children by others who we interact with. By others, by other children, by other caretakers, by our educators, by people in the neighborhood. All of these things. But it starts in the household. Because, how I walk out the door looking at the world, right, is important. Because if I see the world as this violent place, as this uncaring and unloving place, and that's how I enter into this world, that's how I'm going to treat everybody I'm in touch with. Right? And then the person who I do gravitate towards, right, who I, for whatever reason, I develop some kind of friendship, relationship, lovership, sex shit with, whatever it is I do, what happens is that's not going to last. I'm not going to have lasting relationships because, at the end of the day, I still see the world through this lens. And when that one person does something that triggers the childhood trauma within me, it's a wrap. Because I'm in it, but I'm no longer happy. I'm no longer happy. Right? Um, the next time you feel trapped and choiceless, remind yourself that you're more capable, right? And you're in control than you think. You're more capable and in control than you think. You are more capable and in control than you think. Stop telling yourself that you have to stay in this relationship. Stop telling yourself that you need this person to validate who you are. Stop telling yourself that you need this person to love you, because if they don't love you, right, then what kind of life are you going to have? You're going to have to find somebody else. Oh, and you can't find anybody else because people don't like you when you be you. There's somebody for everybody. In most cases, you'll find that people don't like you because they don't like themselves, and they don't like what they see in you, which is actually a reflection of themselves. Therefore, they begin to become resistant to things that you say, because what you're saying to them, you'll actually see the behaviors constantly playing out, but they justify it, they rationalize it, they don't see it from that perspective. And sometimes people truly don't see those things because they have the mask from their past, right? And they can't see anything else but that. And oftentimes it takes a great loss in people's lives, whether it be through death, divorce, separation, or another significant event. They will never see it. And there's nothing that you can do about that. Number 3 on that list is passive aggressiveness, right? When children grow up in households where there are only unhealthy expressions of anger, they grow up believing that anger is unacceptable. I saw tons of unacceptable, unhealthy expressions of anger. So getting angry, right, was something that, even though I may have been feeling it, I knew that it wasn't acceptable, right? I knew that it was unhealthy. When I got angry and I acted out, I got my behind whooped. You know, when I got angry and I said something about, and I expressed that anger, even if I had just expressed the mere fact that I was angry, right? I got my behind whooped. Right? When I looked at, it's funny because I always tell people about how, how is it, your parents be whooping your behind, right? And then and telling you to shut up at the same time. Like, shut up, shut up, shut up. And listen to what's being said, right? Here's the belt in hand, striking your flesh. Painfully striking your flesh, and you're being told, shut up, shut up. Listen, look at what's happening. Wit, shut up. Wit, shut up. What happens? You're reinforcing the child, right, to not express hurt, pain, right, any emotions related to what's being imposed upon you. When you look at being in an environment where people just yell and scream and yell and scream and yell and scream and yell and scream, right? How do you think that child reacts to it? I talked about it the other day. The child withdraws from that environment, right? It says it here. If you witness anger expressed violently, then as an adult you might think that anger is a violent emotion and therefore must be suppressed. Or if you grew up in a family that suppressed anger and your parents taught you that anger is on a list of emotions you aren't supposed to feel, you suppress it. Even as an adult who could benefit from anger. We have anger for a reason. Anger is often the joy experience to move somebody towards change, right? Anger is not something that you want to play with, right? Because what happens is that when I get angry and I suppress it, and I'm in a relationship with someone, and I keep it, and then I get angry about something else, it's just a matter of time before the explosion comes, right? I've seen it firsthand, right? But there's something else about this anger. It deteriorates your spirit. It deteriorates your spirit. You begin to be broken down, right? You get to the point of like, you don't say anything. You cry alone. You know, you cower inside while you stand haughtily with your chest up. But inside, you're cowering. It's a matter of do you want to spend the rest of your life feeling like this? Do you want to die inside? You know, there's no death worse than, right, a spiritual death. You can have all kind of things happen to you, right? You can talk about how painful somebody burning in a fire, burning, you know, you're alive and you're burning. Problem with the spiritual death is it resides within you over and over and over again. It resurfaces. And you walk through life like a zombie. You're just existing. You're just here. You're just entering into relationships, you know, zombified, just going along to get along, and you find yourself in any kind of relationship, any kind of relationship, and no longer see it as abuse. You see it as the norm. It's the norm. You know, you have folks who, like, their lives are drama driven and they don't even see that the normalcy of their environment is conflict and confrontation. Unresolved anger, suppressed anger. Suppressed anger. That's passive aggressive. It's suppressed anger. That's all it is. And every interaction is met with resistance, defensiveness, fight. Every interaction. There's never an interaction that does not have the foundation of suppressed anger.